On a long flight in the vastness of the sky, Sophia Blackwell, CEO of InnovateTech, stepped into the first-class cabin, unaware that she was harboring a deep secret, an invisible but always simmering war. A simple request, just wanting a menu, became the turning point that opened up an unexpected confrontation. When the flight attendants refused to serve her, treating her like a regular passenger, simply because she did not carry obvious signs of wealth or power, Sophia could not stay silent. Behind the facade of a successful female CEO, there was a resilient warrior who was always ready to stand up against any injustice, whether it was on a flight or anywhere. As tensions between her and the flight attendants come to a head and the truth is revealed, Sophia faces more than just a flight rife with discrimination. It's a relentless battle to reclaim the dignity and respect that has been stripped away. The journey will not only change her, but also the way society views true power. Sophia Carter leaned back in her leather chair in her top-floor office at InnovateTech, her sharp blue eyes scanning her laptop screen as revenue figures rolled up. She was used to billion-dollar numbers, hour-long meetings, and daily pressure, but she never forgot where she started. 10 years ago, Sophia was just an ambitious software engineer, working hard in a small apartment in San Francisco. At that time, she had nothing but a bold idea and ironclad perseverance. InnovateTech was born from sleepless nights, from the sacrifices of youth, from failures that almost made you give up. But today, it has become one of the world's leading technology companies, providing artificial intelligence and automation solutions to the largest corporations. Sophia is a determined, talented, but rather private woman. She rarely appears in public, dislikes noise or meaningless praise. For her, true value lies not in fame, but in what she creates. That is also the reason why she always stays away from lavish parties or meetings with high society. For Sophia, work is the only thing that really matters. However, even the strongest people need a quiet moment to recharge. This trip to London was not only to attend Europe's top technology conference, but also a rare opportunity for her to temporarily escape the frenetic pace of life in Silicon Valley. A first-class flight, a few quiet hours in the sky, a moment to reflect on the future of InnovateTech, Sophia thought she could really relax. She dragged her suitcase out of the office, leaving behind the long meetings, the dense spreadsheets, and the pressures that only those at the top could understand. Little did she know that this flight would not be just a journey, but would become a true test of her determination and mettle. Because even when she doesn't seek confrontation, sometimes the world forces her to stand up again. Sophia Carter stepped into the first-class cabin of Skyglobe Flight 719 from San Francisco to London, not paying much attention to the opulence around her. The leather seats were plush, the minibars sparkled under warm yellow lights, and the passengers were dressed in expensive clothes. But to her, this was just a means to get to her destination. Nothing more, nothing less. She glanced around. Familiar faces from the world of international businessmen and financiers were scattered about. Some were chatting animatedly about new deals, others were sipping expensive wine. Sophia tugged on her blazer and walked to her seat by the window, where she could enjoy a few quiet hours before landing. But from the moment she sat down, a subtle but obvious difference began to manifest. A middle-aged man, probably a hedge fund manager, sat 2 rows away from her. As soon as he entered, a flight attendant appeared with a bright smile and bent down to offer him a glass of fine champagne. Another female passenger, wearing sparkling jewelry, was also greeted with warm greetings. Sophia waited for a while, but no one came to ask if she needed anything. She was not the type to demand special service. But when she saw the obvious difference in treatment, she began to feel something was wrong. A young, slim flight attendant with neatly tied blonde hair passed by her seat without stopping. Sophia frowned slightly, deciding to call out, "Excuse me, can I have the menu?" The flight attendant paused for a second, her eyes flicking to Sophia before quickly regaining her composure. "Oh, the menu? I'll check it out." Her tone was a bit distant, unlike the warmth she had when serving other passengers. Sophia nodded, waiting patiently, but 5 minutes passed, then 10. The menu still didn't appear. She looked around and saw the hedge fund manager flipping through the wine list with a satisfied smile. Another waiter was enthusiastically recommending dishes to the woman in the sparkling jewelry. But Sophia was ignored. She leaned back in her seat, her lips pursed. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered this kind of discrimination. Being a woman, especially an Asian woman in tech, was often overlooked at first glance. But what bothered her most wasn't the fact that she was being ignored, but the confidence with which these people believed she didn't deserve the same level of service as the other passengers. And that was their biggest mistake. At this moment, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin became strange. It wasn't because something big happened, but rather the little things were drawing an invisible line. Sophia could feel it, little by little. She put down the book and glanced around. A few rows away, a group of businessmen were still chatting animatedly, their laughter mingling with the clinking of wine glasses. A flight attendant quickly poured them more champagne, smiling warmly, her movements practiced as if she had served them dozens of times before. But in her position, things turned out completely differently. Sophia looked for the nearest flight attendant, gently signaling. She wasn't in any hurry or annoyed. She simply wanted a menu, a simple request for any first-class passenger. The flight attendant, a blonde with a somewhat forced smile, glanced at Sophia before replying, "Oh, the menu? I'll check to see if it's still available." That answer would not have been unusual if it weren't for the fact that she never turned back. Sophia waited. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But the menu still didn't appear. At first, she thought the flight attendant had forgotten. But then she noticed that just a few feet away, another passenger, a middle-aged businessman whom the flight attendant had shown particular favor, was holding a luxurious leather-bound menu. And not just one, but the entire group sitting around him had their menus in front of them, without anyone having to ask for them. This time, Sophia did not keep silent. When the blonde flight attendant passed by, she spoke up. "Sorry, but I haven't received my menu yet." She paused, as if pulled away from a more interesting conversation. Her eyes swept over Sophia with indifference, then the fake smile returned to her lips. "Ah, yes, wait a moment. We will serve him first." The statement seems polite, but hidden within it is an unmistakable distinction. Sophia followed her gaze, and of course, the destination was still the middle-aged man who was receiving all the attention that she was deprived of. "If you need anything, please wait." Sophia did not respond immediately. She just looked straight at the stewardess, silently observing. The other girl probably expected some concession, some resignation. But that did not come. Not because Sophia is a female CEO, not because she expects special treatment, but because she knows when an invisible line is being drawn and she is on the other side. A moment later, Sophia asked for another blanket. This time the flight attendant nodded and quickly left. But she did not return. She didn't forget. She wasn't busy. She simply didn't want to serve Sophia. And in that moment, Sophia realized one thing. Silence was never an option. Sophia slowly placed the glass on the table. Her fingertips lightly ran along the rim, feeling the coolness of the remaining liquid. She no longer felt mere annoyance. It was a simmering anger, an undercurrent waiting to rise. This is not just an inconvenience. This is an insult. She was no stranger to discrimination. As a female CEO in the tech industry, Sophia had faced countless skeptical looks, countless insinuations about whether she was really capable of leading an empire. But today, on this flight, she was not a CEO. She was just a regular passenger, a woman overlooked because she didn't have a familiar face on a magazine cover or a name that resonated in the financial world. She pressed the call button for the flight attendant. This time not for some trivial request. "I want to see the captain." Her words rang out clearly, leaving no room for confusion or ignorance. There was a moment of silence before the young stewardess who had ignored her request approached, a look of surprise on her face but still maintaining her aloof demeanor. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain is very busy." "I'll wait," Sophia interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, but there was a firmness to it that made the flight attendant pause. "Tell him I want to talk, and I believe a first-class passenger shouldn't be denied such a simple request." The flight attendant bit her lip, her eyes wavering slightly before nodding and walking away. Sophia folded her arms across her chest, leaned back in her seat, and looked out the window. Outside, the night was still endless. the tiny lights of the cities below twinkling like falling stars. But in this cabin, a confrontation was about to take place, and she was not leaving without an answer. A few minutes later, a man in a pilot's uniform approached. Captain Robert Williams, in his mid-50s, was tall and had sharp, gray-blue eyes. He had the calm demeanor of a man accustomed to pressure, but even that calmness could not conceal the wariness he felt as he looked at Sophia. "I'm the captain of this flight. I understand you have a matter to discuss?" Sophia slowly stood up, adjusting her coat before looking him straight in the eye. "Yes. I would like to know if your airline has a policy of customer discrimination." The captain frowned slightly. "I don't understand what you mean." "Really?" She tilted her head, her voice still calm, but her eyes starting to turn a little cold. "Then let me help you understand. I am a first-class passenger, having paid a lot of money to be on this flight. Yet, when I asked for a menu, I was ignored. When I asked for a blanket, it never came. But at the same time, other passengers, specifically a group of businessmen sitting a few rows away, were served so attentively that they didn't even need to open their mouths. I wonder, is this the airline's service standard?" The surroundings became strangely quiet. Some passengers started to turn to look, sensing the tension in the air. Before the captain could speak, another voice rang out. "It seems you're overreacting." Sophia slowly turned around. The middle-aged man who was the businessman favored by the flight attendant earlier was looking at her with a challenging half-smile. "The flight attendants on this flight did a great job. I don't see anything wrong with the way they served me." Sophia looked at him, her eyes shining with calm sharpness. "Of course," she said, her voice low but not lacking in determination. "Because you're the one who always comes first. But put yourself in my shoes. If you were ignored, treated as if you didn't exist, would you still feel okay?" The man chuckled, as if he found her doing something funny. But before he could reply, the captain spoke up. "I understand your concerns, and I will check with the crew to ensure there are no misunderstandings. I hope you can remain calm and continue your flight comfortably." Sophia stared at him. "No, I don't want a superficial exchange just to smooth things over. I want an acknowledgement that discrimination occurred. If your airline doesn't have such a policy, I would like you to ask the flight attendant to publicly apologize and ensure this won't happen again." The captain was silent for a moment. He could sense the intensity in her words, and more importantly, he knew that if he didn't handle this situation properly, it could turn into a bigger scandal. Finally, he nodded. "I'll talk to the crew right away." Sophia knew that didn't mean he was admitting his mistake, but at least it was a step forward. She fought not only for herself, but also for those who had been treated the same way, but did not have the opportunity to speak up. This fight isn't over yet, but she's laid the groundwork for change, big or small, and Sophia is never one to stop before she starts. Captain Robert Williams was silent for a few seconds, his eyes slightly confused by Sophia's stubbornness. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin became tense as all the passengers watched intently. Some people put down their phones, seemingly realizing that this situation was not simple and could become a hot topic. Sophia stood there, her back straight, her eyes sharp as knives. She had no intention of backing down. "Captain Williams, I think it's time you reviewed your crew." Her words were not angry, but they carried such weight that the whole cabin seemed to stop. The captain nodded, signaling the chief flight attendant to come closer. The woman in a neat uniform stepped forward, her face unable to hide the tension. "Miss Blackwell, I sincerely apologize if there has been any misunderstanding." Sophia curled her lips, her eyes unwavering. "Misunderstanding?" she pressed. "Are you saying I imagined this whole thing?" The head stewardess hesitated for a moment, but then sighed. She turned to look at the young stewardess who had twice ignored Sophia's requests. "Sophie, please explain why there was a delay and omission in serving Miss Blackwell." The young flight attendant seemed surprised to be called directly by name. She pursed her lips, glanced at the captain, then bowed her head. I didn't mean to. I just thought." She hesitated, then said quickly, "I thought she was just a regular passenger. I didn't recognize who she was." A chill ran down Sophia's spine. She chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "So if I were a famous CEO, would I be treated differently?" The young flight attendant did not answer. The head flight attendant sighed, but she couldn't deny the obvious truth. Just because Sophia was the CEO didn't mean she deserved better treatment, but because everyone deserved the same respect. Captain Williams turned to the young flight attendant, his voice stern. "Do you realize your mistake?" The flight attendant bit her lip, then bowed her head again. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have let my prejudices affect the way I serve passengers." Sophia looked straight at the girl, not with anger, but with a look of understanding. She knew what it felt like to be judged by others based on appearance. But the difference between her and others was that she did not accept it. "I don't want a half-hearted apology," she said. "I want to know that you're going to change the way you see people. There are going to be a lot of passengers after me getting on these flights. And I don't want any of them to be treated like I was today." The flight attendant looked up at Sophia, perhaps for the first time truly seeing her not just as a difficult passenger, but as someone fighting for what was right. She took a deep breath, then nodded. "I understand. I will change." The captain nodded. "We will report this incident in the company's internal meeting, and I promise to make adjustments in the service process so that a similar situation does not happen again." Sophia stared at him, trying to gauge whether his promise was truly sincere. But then she decided that, at least this time, she had gotten what she wanted: acknowledgement. When the captain and the flight attendants left, the atmosphere in the cabin was still tense. But Sophia knew a small change had begun. An elderly passenger sitting nearby suddenly spoke up. "You have guts." Sophia turned to look at him, her lips slightly curled up. No one should accept injustice in silence. Outside the window, the night sky was as endless as ever, but something inside Sophia had changed, and she knew this wouldn't be the last time she stood up for what was right. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had calmed down, but the aftershocks of the incident had not completely dissipated. Some passengers still looked at Sophia with curiosity and respect, while others bowed their heads silently, as if they had just witnessed a lesson they would not want to forget. When the flight landed in London, Sophia packed her things and walked out of the plane calmly, as if nothing had happened. But she knew this story did not end here. A few days later, news began to spread. An anonymous passenger recorded the incident on the flight, and the video quickly gained traction on social media. Major news outlets such as CNN, the BBC, and the New York Times all reported on the incident, raising questions about how airlines treat their passengers. American Airlines was forced to speak out. In an official statement, the airline admitted its mistake and announced that it would conduct an internal investigation. As a result, the stewardess was fired for violating the code of conduct. But more importantly, the airline decided to overhaul its entire stewardess training process, ensuring that all passengers are served fairly, without any bias. A new training program was implemented, emphasizing the equal treatment of customers, regardless of who they were, what they were wearing, or where they sat. An emergency meeting of the company's leaders was held to discuss how to rebuild the brand's image after the media shock. For Sophia, this is more than just a personal victory. She wasn't just happy that she got an apology. What really pleased her was that she had helped change the system. Future flights would be different. Passengers like her would no longer have to endure unjust discrimination just because their appearance didn't fit a certain mold. Sitting in her hotel room in London, Sophia looked out the large glass windows where the city lights were shining brightly in the night. She took a sip of red wine, savoring the rich flavor on her tongue. This wasn't the first time she had to fight for what was right. And it certainly wouldn't be the last. She learned one important thing. No one can change the world if they choose to remain silent. A week after the flight, Sophia walked into the offices of InnovateTech, the glass-walled headquarters that reflected the bright morning sunlight of Silicon Valley. The air was fresh, but her mind had not yet fully left what had happened. Business reports were piled high on her desk. Projects continued to roll, and Sophia, as usual, was immersed in the life of a CEO, making decisions, holding meetings, and formulating strategies. But something inside her had changed. A new email appeared on the screen. "Thanks for speaking up." It came from a stranger, telling of her experience of being discriminated against on a plane. of her helplessness in being unable to do anything but accept it. And then she wrote, "But when I read your story, I realized I don't have to stay silent anymore. Thank you for not turning away." Sophia leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on the window, where the busy streets below were moving constantly. She didn't seek fame from the event, but it came in a way she didn't expect. The media presented her not only as a talented businesswoman, but also as someone who stood up for justice. They call her an icon, a woman who represents the voice of those who have been overlooked. But for Sophia, what matters most is that real change is not the praise, not the title, but the impact she leaves behind with each action. Because the fight for justice never ends. And Sophia Carter, a woman who has been judged by her appearance, knows that she will continue this journey not only for herself, but also for those who have not dared to speak up.